Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am gonna stop sharing my screen so that you can also see Shaylee, I hope. How do I? Okay. Uh, I don't know how to make you see Shaylee. One moment.
Does it help if I unmute myself?
There, now we can
Awesome.
see. It's gonna go to speaker view back and forth. I think that's okay. We'll go with it.
Sounds good.
So thank you everyone for joining us. We're really excited to get our second annual Women in Sports Speaker Series started off. I'm really excited about this talk. I want to start though with a land acknowledgement. I do want to acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Coast Salish peoples. And I'm incredibly grateful to be on this land and to be able to benefit from all of the amazing parts of this land. I also want to just encourage you all to take some time today or throughout this week to check out the Indian Residential School Survivor Society. That is our title not-for-profit organization, and it is one that we feel is really important. And so we hope you'll take some time to educate yourself and to donate if possible. And I'm going to pass it over to Shaylee.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shaylee Toney. So I had the pleasure of being coached by Amy when I played UBC hockey. And I'm here today to just help out with the webinar. And I'm addressing you from Treaty 6 territory, which is colonially known as Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And so, yeah, basically the series is a platform dedicated to really promoting equity and accessibility within sports, particularly around gender equity. But in doing our land acknowledgement, we're also really wanting to address and be accountable to the ways that our work in sports intersects with processes of settler colonialism. And as we know, as Canadians, we're having to face up to the ongoing colonial history within Canada. And this is a very triggering and impactful time for a lot of us. And so as we move forward today in our learning and in our presentation, we want to just hold that close and really understand that when we're working towards equity and justice in our sporting spheres, it is also inextricably linked to anti-racism, decolonialism, and anti-oppression. So I just ask that you hold space in your heart just to be accountable to your privilege and your power and how you show up on this land.
Thank you so much, Shaylee. So now, Natalka unfortunately can't actually be with us live. She is currently off the grid. So her and I met up and we did pre-record the talk. So in a minute, I'm going to do a whole bunch of technical stuff and show you that video. I do encourage you though to put any questions you have in the Q&A box. Or if there's tech issues, please use the chat to let me know. When you put in a Q&A question, if you include your name, so just don't put it as anonymous if you're comfortable, then that way I can actually get Natalka to follow up with you after the fact. She will also, on the last slide is her contact info, so you are more than welcome to reach out to her directly. So now bear with me as I share my screen and do all the fun tech stuff. Okay.
Hello, and thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Natalka Lewis, and I want to further acknowledge that I live, work, move, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, the Kainai, Kainai, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda First Nations. The city of Calgary, Mohkinstsis, is also home to the Métis Nation Region 3 and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. This sacred gathering space provides us with an opportunity to engage in and demonstrate leadership on reconciliation. As a third-generation settler, I have personally benefited from this land and the community that it brings to me as an artist, a creator, and a learner. As settlers, we can and need to do more in the spirit of reconciliation. We have been asked to learn and unlearn. This idea of unlearning is important and is something that I'm also going to touch on in our topic today. I hope that we can take what we are discovering about the ideas of unlearning and apply it towards Canada's history and the act of reconciliation today and for all of our days moving forward. When Amy approached me and asked me to speak, I was nervous. I was unsure if this was, I get nervous for these kinds of things in presenting, but don't tell anybody that because I actually end up doing it more than I think I should sometimes. And I went into planning facts and data statistics mode and just deciding all the things that I thought were really important about body image in sport and finding out sort of what are the research behind it and things like that. But then after reading more about women in sport, I realized that that wasn't actually really what I wanted to present about, because to me, it seems like it's more about stories and it's about connecting and it's about being validated. It's about women being heard. So I'm going to start by telling you my story. And I apologize, I'm going to read it off my paper because that's just what helps me to be able to remember it and so that I don't let my nerves and my worries sort of take over. I was just 3 years old and I stepped on the stage for the first time. An adjudicator pinched my cheeks and into the microphone so the audience could hear him. He told me that I was too cute to not get a gold medal and a scholarship. At barely 3 years old, I had learned that my cute appearance was a key to an external reward and was something to be repeated. I just needed to look cute. At 9, I was put on a high-fat diet because my older sister was underweight, and they feared that I might be too. And then when I turned 11 and I began to go through puberty, I was teased by my mother and my grandmother for eating too much and getting a belly and hips. At 10, we started getting measured for costumes, and we paid attention to each other's measurements. We always knew when someone's went up or went down. I was also 10 when I was first told that it would be rude for a male partner to have to lift a heavy girl because she might break his wrists. I continued to be told to stay light if I wanted to be lifted by males for many years after that. I was 11 when I had a growth spurt and I was moved to the back line in choreography. My skills as a dancer mattered less than my appearance did, and tall girls had to stand in the back. I was 12 years old and I asked why my male teammates did not have the same requirements or expectations, and I was told that they got certain privileges in dance because they were boys, and girls just had to work harder and compete with one another. I learned that my anatomy meant that I did not deserve the same things as my male counterparts. At 13, my ballet teacher told me straight to my face that I was not deserving of the mark that I had received on my ballet exam because a dancer like me is not good enough to get a mark that high. I learned that I could not trust my own skills or abilities or the achievements that I had earned. Achievements meant nothing anymore because they weren't deserved and I still was not good enough. At 13 and a half, I attended an audition for a prestigious ballet school, and before they saw us dance, they lined us up and compared our bodies from the front and from the side and in the splits. They made cuts shortly after that. I learned that the way that my body looked was the most important aspect to getting in, and not how I could make my body perform or the artist who lived inside of it. I was 14 and I walked into a modeling agency and I was signed to then be told that I would need to lose 15 pounds to be on a runway. At 14 and a half, I was spending my allowance on fitness magazines, and I was doing workouts and sit-ups in my bedroom for hours in the middle of the night to try to lose weight. I restricted food, and I didn't know how to lose weight, and I thought about it all the time. I was also getting messages telling me I was supposed to be grateful and love my body the way that it is. I was really confused. At 15, I was told that the camera adds 10 pounds and that I would need to lose more weight to land any serious acting roles in film. I was 16 years old, and my peers at my folk dance classes called me Gigantor as a nickname because I was taller than them and I had longer legs than them. I wanted to make myself smaller. At the same age, my peers at my ballet studio told me that I had it easier, and I was only better at ballet because I had long legs. I felt guilty for having long legs. I learned that no matter what, my body was just wrong. At 19, an esteemed teacher told me in front of the class that it was too bad that I didn't have enough drive or talent because I had the right body type for ballet. I learned that I had failed because I could not live up to the way that I was expected to based on my body type. I was 20 when I punished myself for not having the right hands that a choreographer wanted. I was ashamed that I could not make my hands look or perform the way that she wanted them to. I felt like I had failed as a dancer because of my hands. I was 21 years old and told that my baby pink leotard was a good one to wear because then the teacher could count my ribs, so I should wear it more often. I was 22 years old when this same teacher told me to stop eating French fries or I would fail my ballet teaching exam. I had not had French fry in months. I learned that my body would always be an integral part of my success, even as a teacher. It didn't just stop when I wasn't a student or a performer. At 22, I was heartbroken after being dumped, so I starved myself to gain control back. I received more compliments on my body than I ever had in my life. I continued to restrict food for a long time, and I was afraid to gain weight back. I was 23 when I really saw my own body in its skin for the first time through artistic body photography. I deepened my artistic practice, and I learned that my worth as a dancer and as a human is not actually tied to my appearance. I was 26 when I began my spiritual practice of yoga and meditation, and I learned how to begin to stop punishing my body and to start thanking it. I began therapy shortly thereafter, and I changed many things about my life approach. I was 29 years old when I began teaching at my old training institution. I was 30 when I knew that the culture was not healthy for me, but I stayed anyways. I still had not yet learned that my drive for status, external validations, achievement, and success was lingering. I was 31 years old when I graduated from my master's degree, and I began my practice as a therapist. I learned that I am called to working with others who are walking the path that I have been on. I was 32 when I was diagnosed with ADHD and I began medication, a medication which would cause me to lose weight. The work of many years of therapy and self-esteem and confidence and self-love came unraveled as the compliments about my body began to roll in alongside some weight loss. Shortly thereafter, at 33 years old, despite my strength, my knowledge, my acceptance and love for my body, I secretly enjoyed seeing that my body looked the way that it hadn't in years. But then the weight kept coming off, and I became ashamed of the attention I was getting, and I wanted to hide how much weight I had lost and deflect the questions about why I was losing weight. I learned that no matter what the context is, when someone comments on my body, I am triggered and I begin to question my worth. This leads me to today. I'm actually 33 right now. This only happened within the last few months. I have learned that my body and its image is something that I might have to wrestle with for the rest of my life. My name is Natalka Lewis. I am a dancer, I'm a therapist, I'm a mental health counselor, and I would say that I'm a recovering perfectionist who battles body image and self-esteem in my sport. This is my story, but I know that many other women have similar ones, just with different ingredients, settings, or characters. The story also has good things. It has moments of joy and abundance and a lot of confidence, but it also has a lot of pain and body image issues. I chose to tell you my story instead of stats and facts because I believe that stories are actually more powerful words than facts are. They resonate a bit deeper. It doesn't matter that I'm a dancer and maybe you're a soccer player or a rugby player or you're a coach. I would put money on the fact that we all have some kind of similar stories to tell, and that we have a complicated relationship with our sport because of that. How can we love something so deeply and it give us so much joy, but it can also cause us to have such massive struggles with self-esteem and our body image at the same time? So that's what I'm here to talk about today. I'm just going to open up a slideshow. Just give me a second here so I can get it. Also great at technology. Sorry, it's coming. Okay. Great, so I want to start by talking about tools as we move into some slides. So there's going to be some things as we move forward through the rest of our webinar where I'm going to give you some exercises and some reflections to do, and I'll give you a little bit of time. And then, obviously, since I can't see everybody and I'm not there with you, I won't know exactly when you're done. So I'll gauge the time. I'll give you a little bit of space to work on it here. And then if you want to take that exercise and finish it later, if you don't finish it, please do. So thinking about tools, when it comes to our tools, as an athlete or as a dancer or as an artist, all these different things. A painter's tools are her brushes, right? That's pretty obvious. The carpenter's tool is the wood. The songwriter's tool is her instrument. The athlete's tool is her body. That's where it gets really tricky, because when the tool doesn't work, usually, when it breaks or if something goes wrong with it, we replace it with a better one, or we fix it. Often we replace it because it'll wear out. But an athlete only gets one that she gets to work with, one tool to mend, to keep. And she also lives in it. We live in a society that cultivates a complicated relationship with our bodies as it is, and self-esteem for women. When your body's your main tool, it can be really confusing. You want it to work a certain way, but you also have to appreciate it. You want it to do certain things, and if it's not working, that can be a real challenge towards the way that our minds and our bodies connect. How do we have self-esteem when our tool isn't working the way that we want it to? Quite frankly, I think that many women in sport have learned that regardless of what they look like, they might be thinking that they have the wrong body type. Maybe it feels like body image in sport has led us to believe that we should love our bodies, but it also has to look and function this certain way. We have guilt if we don't love our bodies, and we have guilt if we do. Using our body as a tool involves vulnerability. It can bring up doubt, it can bring up worry, self-esteem and body image problems, body dysmorphia, eating disorders, perfectionism, dissociation, anxiety, depression, and comparison. When we utilize our bodies to enhance and grow our craft, it can be hard to offer ourselves compassion. We want to fix it. We want it to work. It's our fault that it's not doing what it needs to do. Our minds and our bodies are connected, and sometimes we forget that as people, but especially as athletes or artists. By integrating our mind and our body, our tool becomes stronger. It's not one or the other. It's all one and the same. And instead of them working against each other, they can work together to keep both aspects healthier. In my story that I shared earlier, all those little anecdotes point to one thing. I had learned to see myself and my body through the eyes of a critical judge. But we live in our bodies. And as a human, not as an athlete, but as a human, we really struggle with that dichotomy. So I'm going to invite you to take a moment of reflection. I want you to think about your own story. We're going to answer 3 different questions. Okay, I'm going to come back to this slide a couple times because I'm going to move forward and share some of my thoughts on my own journey. Because in the reflection of piece, I want you to be able to be vulnerable with yourself. So I'm going to be really vulnerable with you, and I'm going to share some of the things with you that I don't like to admit to other people, and especially not to myself. So the first question that I want you to consider as you think about your own story is, what does healthy body image look like to you? It's not going to be the same for all of us. So what are the ingredients that go into that recipe? What do you want that healthy body image to look like? For me, okay, so here's some examples for myself, and I'm going to give a little bit of elaboration on a couple of them, but not all. For myself, body image, that healthy body image looks like self-compassion, acceptance of my current body at all days of the time or all times of the day and the month. Okay, so that might mean that my body changes after I eat. It does not look the same after I eat a meal. But I can accept that. I want to be able to accept that my body changes. My body can go up and down at different times of the day and different times of the month. For me, it looks like process-oriented goals and outlooks, which means I'm working on how I'm achieving something that has to do with my body, but not looking at what I'm achieving. I'm looking at the process upon which I'm working towards my goals, and I'm validating myself based on my process and not on my result. It also includes gratitude and not punishment. It includes a desire to exercise for health and joy and not for my appearance. It includes the ability to let things roll off my back, which is sometimes a really hard one for me. It includes admiration for others, but not comparison. So that doesn't mean that I only think about myself and that I don't see that others are doing a really good job and want what they have, but I'm not working at comparison. And we're going to come back to that a little bit later. It includes patience, and it includes being comfortable with myself without makeup and in my own skin, maybe without clothes. And it's acceptance for me that there will be good and bad days with my body image. I'm going to accept that it's not always going to be a good day and that having those bad body image days are normal, and that's okay. Take a couple more seconds, and I want you to just write down some of your own, and then we'll move into the next one. The second piece of our reflection, I want you to start thinking about what are some of the body image assumptions that you struggle with. We all probably have different ones that we're dealing with based on our past and the environments that we grew up in. And basically, these assumptions, they're kind of rules that we choose to live by. Whether or not we like to admit that these rules are happening, sometimes we make implicit rules for ourselves, rules that we might not even be aware of, and then we try to live by them. Often these rules are impossible. And when we don't meet the expectations of these invisible rules, it's really hard to feel good about ourselves. It's the fastest way for us to beat ourselves up. And sometimes we don't even know what those rules are. So I'm going to share with you what some of my rules are. I don't struggle with these rules every day, but these are the ones that my brain and my body come back to that I've struggled with probably my whole life, and that I continue to have to navigate. My first rule is that if I gain weight, I will not look like a dancer anymore. And for me, that comes with a plethora of different issues. Another is that if I don't set rules for myself, I would lose control. Times when I eat, times when I drink wine, things that I can eat. If I tell people that I struggle with my body image, they will think that I'm not qualified to do my job. That's a rule that I've learned is not helpful for me in my role as a counselor, but that exists, that I should have it all figured out, which isn't true. If I want to teach about body image, I should not struggle with my own anymore. Another rule that I put on myself is that my body is old and it never accomplished what I wanted it to, but now it's too late. The assumption that if I lose too much weight, people will think that I have an eating disorder or body dysmorphia. And will I look like a fraud if I teach body positivity, but I'm thin? Will people believe me? And the last one that I have on here is that I must not pass on old biases or assumptions to my clients or students. And that if I do, I've really set them up for failure. I'd like you to take a couple moments and reflect on which body image assumptions might be coming up for you. And notice what might be coming up with them. They're not always easy. They can sometimes bring up different emotions that can be uncomfortable to sit with. We sometimes try to push those away and deflect them, thinking, I don't want to admit that that's actually true. Give yourself permission to just write down what's coming up, whether or not you want it to be true or not. You might start to notice as you go through the next week of your life that you start to recognize some of those body image assumptions that maybe aren't coming to mind right now. And then come back to this, write them down after that. The final reflection piece for right now is asking, where do those negative body image assumptions come from in your own life? What factors contributed to creating those rules or assumptions? And also, what factors continue to contribute to them? What's perpetuating them? I'll share a couple of mine with you. So that negative body image assumption, where does it come from for me? A lifetime of standing in front of a mirror, which I still do. I teach 6 days a week in a studio in front of a mirror. A lifetime wearing clothes that accent my body, tight dance clothes. A sport or an art, whichever you want to call dance, in which the body is the tool. It came from receiving validation, praise, or critique based on how my body looks, functions, and performs. I did not have a lot of validation when I was a kid, external validation that came from my brain or my processing, because I did so much of my sport that a lot of where my validation was coming from was based on my body and how it performed. And I learned to seek external validation rather than knowing how to internally validate. It came from being unable to change many of the features which affected my performance. Not being a super flexible person, not having high extensions, not being a short person and being able to be grounded in my floor work. Could not change those things, even though I wanted to. It came from coaching. The people who coached me and trained me and built me up. It came from the language that the people around me were using about me and about themselves. And it came from the culture in which I grew up. And I'm talking maybe my cultural background, but also the culture within the places where I chose to dance or to try a different sport. It came from my environment, my family, my sport, my school. It came from ADHD. Undiagnosed ADHD brought a lot of shame. It came from anxiety and depression, which I struggled with a lot throughout my whole life. And it also came from my own mindset and my resistance to actually identify and make some changes earlier in my life. And still. Hopefully that's given you some jump off points for where your negative body image assumptions might be coming from. Take a couple more seconds and we'll just finish writing them down in your book before I move on. If you notice while you're finishing up writing, maybe some of these phrases might bring up something in you or make you recall something. Everything that you see on this page was said to me from a real person. All of these people are either professional athletes or artists or are coaches or teachers who still stay in their sport. They never gave it up. But these are some of the things that they carried through and that still affect them. These are things that they hear all the time in their own brain because somebody once said it to them. You're too big to play shortstop. You're too short to be a dancer. Some of you are too fat and some of you are too skinny. Stop eating McDonald's. You carry too much weight. You are too heavy to box in that weight class, but you need to gain a lot more to be in the next one up. You have lazy turnout. I don't bother watching you because of your body. If you're going to do it like that, don't do it at all. If you can't play at that level, you can't play at that level because you are a woman. Are you stupid? That is a demonstration of how not to do it. Pretty hard to read some of those, hey? Like those are real things that people have heard and that they stay with them as adults. Some of these people heard some of these comments when they were really young. So moving into, we talked about this a little bit before, but that self-worth and validation piece. So if you notice on here, we've got two different sort of squiggly lines. The top left box where it says events and worth. Okay, so when we think about events, that's what we see in the red line. What I'm talking about in terms of events is external validations. So going to your competition, getting your judges' feedback, any sort of external event or external feedback or praise. And then the worth is our worth. So how I view myself as a person. And when the worth is tied in to what happens with the outcome of the event, and if events are going to go up or down like this, as life does, life never stays. Things are good, things go bad. Maybe they stay bad for a little while longer and then they go good and maybe they stay up there, but inevitably they go down. Sometimes it goes down farther, sometimes it goes down just a little bit. If your self-worth is tied into the events that take place, you're going to feel really good when those events are telling you things are good or when things are working out. Now I feel really good about myself. But as soon as the event starts to drop, so does my self-worth. So they go up and down and up and down, and they start to affect me a lot. I find that a lot of people who have grown up in an early specialization sport that I work with in my office experience that, the ping pong effect of up and down through their life. And where we work in our counseling sessions a lot, I actually can't think of a single client that I've worked with as an athlete or a dancer who we have not actually talked about this. This comes up with everybody. And what they want to work towards is to be able to maintain their self-worth as the events of life go up and down like this. And something I often say to my clients is if we think about a baby, because when they think about themselves right now, after everything that they've been through and after experiencing the external validation and the ups and downs that come with it, it can be really hard to not think of those things because we do feel more worthwhile when we've achieved a goal or when we've accomplished something that we've been working towards or when we get a really high score. And so asking them to not think about that in their own life right now can be really, really hard to do. But if you think about a baby and you imagine that if a doctor met this couple and this couple comes in and they're having their very first baby and they're so excited and the baby comes out and the doctor holds the baby and looks at it and then turns to the couple and says, well, this baby has no value. This baby is worthless. We would all be like, oh my gosh, no, like that's disgusting. That's appalling. Every single baby has worth. Just because they're born, because they're babies. They don't have to do anything to prove that they're worthwhile. And we know that. Like, it's disgusting to even think that anyone would say that about a baby. But somewhere in our life, especially as artists and athletes, we stop believing that that's true for ourselves. It might be true for someone else, right? It's true for that person, for sure. But it's not true for me. There's different rules for me. But that's not true, right? And we all know that. But something in there tells us that maybe that's true just for me. And that I have to prove myself. I have to earn that. I have to achieve that task. And once I do, then I'm worthwhile. But that's not true. You have worthwhile because you are a human being. You have worth because you are a human being. And your worth and your self-esteem and your validation exists not because of external events, but because you are a person. And that can be a really hard thing for us to work through. The other piece of this is sometimes our brain lies. When we listen to our brain all the time, because it's constantly chattering, and we train our brains as athletes to guide us to what we need, how do we know when it's lying? How do we recognize? Listen to your body. Often we have two kind of voices in our brains. You maybe have heard this before, depending on whether you've worked with a coach or if you worked on mental skills, but we have an inner cheerleader and we have an inner critic. Most athletes and dancers find that their inner critic is louder, and that makes sense. You've spent your entire life working on skills and refining things, and you're constantly in that growth mindset. But growth mindset doesn't actually equate to inner critic. Those aren't the same, because our critic is there to tell us what we're doing wrong and to keep us down and to tell us that we're not worthwhile. Our inner cheerleader is more involved with our growth mindset because it can validate us and it can start to tell us that, hey, even though you didn't do that very good this time, that doesn't mean that you're not a good person and that you're not a good athlete. You actually are still good at all these things. Maybe you're just struggling at that one skill. But our critic is louder and it tells us way meaner things about ourselves. But we often listen to that one more, probably because it's louder. It's more familiar. We know that voice. It sounds like ourselves. But it's a liar. And how do we tell the difference? A lot of hard work in therapy, I guess. I tell a lot of dancers that I work with, and I think it's really true for all athletes and people who work with their bodies in any kind of sport, is that your body carries so many messages and your body carries a ton of information. It stores it. And we know that's true because of all the research that they've done on trauma. And we know how much the body carries of our past experiences, about the pain that we've been through. And we can actually work through a lot of those things from a mental process by working with the body. And the body knows. So when you spend your entire life training your body's smarter than the average Joe's. You have spent your life training your body to tell messages and to tell stories and to deliver a certain message because of the way that it moves. Your body is meant to tell stories and to tell feelings because of the way that it moves. And self-compassion involves just listening to our bodies. So trust your body, because more than anyone else out there in this world, an athlete and somebody who works with their body and has such a really trusted relationship and understands what the body really feels like, if you can really listen, your body can give you a ton of information about what it needs. And that's how we get self-compassion. So you're an authentic human being, so you can trust that. Your body knows you better than you know yourself sometimes. We're going to do an exercise to just connect with our bodies a little bit more. So I invite you to actually close your eyes for this. I'm sure at some point in your training, in your life, whether or not it was in sport or in school or in drama, if you were involved in that, you might have done something like this before. This is called a body scan, but we're going to take it with a more self-compassionate lens. Okay, so I invite you to find a comfortable position. If you'd like, you can pause the video, and if you want to lay down, go ahead, or just sit comfortably in your chairs with your feet flat on the floor. Try to relax your hands right by your side and keep your feet apart. Then I want you to place one or two hands over your heart or another soothing place on your body. Doing this as a reminder to bring loving and connected presence to your body throughout this exercise. Feel the warmth and the gentle touch of your hands. Take 3 slow, relaxing breaths. And another breath. And then return your arms to your sides if you like, or leave them where they are. We're going to start by thinking about the toes on our left foot, and we're going to begin to notice if there's any sensations in your toes. Try not to have any judgments. Just observe and notice. Are the toes warm or cool, dry or moist? Just feel the sensations in the toes. Ease, discomfort, or perhaps nothing at all. And let each sensation just be as it is. If your toes feel good, perhaps give them a wiggle and appreciate them. Then move to the sole of your left foot. Can you detect any sensations there? Your feet have such a small surface area, yet they hold up your entire body all day long. And as an athlete, they do so much for you. They carry you. They work so hard. Feel free to send your left sole a bit of gratitude, if that feels right. If there's any discomfort, open to it in a nice and tender way. Now sense the whole foot. If your foot feels comfortable, you can also extend gratitude for the discomfort that you don't have. If there is any discomfort, allow that area to soften as if it were wrapped in a warm towel. If you like, just validate that discomfort with words such as, "There is a little discomfort, and it's okay for now." Gradually move your attention up your leg, one part at a time, noticing whatever body sensations are present. Send some appreciation if that part feels fine, and send compassion if there's any discomfort. Still focusing on your left side. Move slowly through the body to your ankle, into your shin and your calf, your knee. When you notice that your mind has wandered, as it always will, just return to the sensations in the body that you are attending to. You might also wish to add in some words of kindness or compassion, such as, "Maybe my knees be at ease. May they be well." And then return your attention to the simple sensations in each body part. Allow this entire process to be exploratory, even playful, just gently working your way through your body, moving up into your thigh and your hip. If you feel uneasy, or judgmental about a particular body part, try putting a hand over your heart or touching that body part and gently breathing. Imagining that kindness and compassion are flowing through your fingers and into your body. Or if you feel ease, offer an inner smile of appreciation if that feels right to you. Now bring your loving awareness to your entire left leg, making room for whatever you might be feeling. Whatever it is, it's okay. And moving into the right leg, to your right toes, to the right sole of the foot. Noticing what sensations are there in the whole of the right foot, into the ankle, the shin and the calf, and into the knee. Feel free to skip any part of the body as well if it brings up too much physical or emotional discomfort. Now onto the thigh, the hip, the entire right leg. Now bring your awareness into your pelvic area, the strong bones that support your legs, and also the soft tissues in your pelvic area. Perhaps feeling that your bum on the floor or on the chair, large muscles that help you climb stairs, and they also help you to sit comfortably, and they also help you to do your sport. And now your lower back. A lot of stress is stored in the lower back and the hips. If you notice any discomfort or tension, you might imagine your muscles are relaxing with each breath, melting away with tenderness. Don't be afraid to shift your posture a little if an adjustment would be helpful. And then into your upper back. And now moving your attention to the front of your body, to your abdomen. Your abdomen is a very complicated part of the body with many organs and body functions. Perhaps try sending some gratitude to this part of the body. If you have any judgments about this part of your body, see if you can say some words of kindness and acceptance. Then move up to your chest, the center of your breathing, also your heart center. This place is the source of love and compassion. Try to infuse your chest with awareness, appreciation, and acceptance. Perhaps put a hand on the center of your chest, allowing yourself to feel whatever it is that you're feeling right now. Continue to bring your awareness through the rest of your upper body, through the arms, the elbows, the wrists, the hands and the fingers, on both sides with loving and compassionate awareness. And now proceed with awareness towards the head, beginning with the neck. If you like, touch your neck with your hand. Remembering how the neck supports your head throughout the day and how it is a conduit for blood and brain to the conduit for blood to the brain and air to the body. Offer appreciation and kindness to your neck, either mentally or with physical touch. If your neck feels good, or sending compassion, if there's any discomfort or discomfort there. And then finally move on to your head, beginning with the back of the head, the hard surface that protects your brain. Gently touch the back of your head if you like. And then your ears, those sensitive organs of perceptions that tell us so much about our world. If you're glad to have the capacity to hear, allow appreciation to rise about that. And then offer that same loving or compassionate awareness to your other organs of perceptions, like your eyes, your nose, your lips. And then finally, your forehead and the crown of your head, and underneath, your brain. Your brain that holds your inner critic and your inner cheerleader. Your brain that holds your thoughts and your worries and your joys. Your brain is comprised of billions of nerve cells that are communicating with each other all the time to help make you make sense of this marvelous world. Your brain is plastic. If your brain lies to you or is mean to you, there are ways that we can rewire our thinking in our brains. Your brain works for you 24/7. If you'd like, just say thank you. And when you have finished giving kind and compassionate attention to your entire body, just take a moment of appreciation and compassion and respect for your body. When you're ready, gently open your eyes. So when we're working with our brain-body connection, those kinds of exercises aren't always easy. They often take a number of attempts in order for that to start to actually connect. So if doing that exercise wasn't easy for you and you found your mind wandering or it felt too long, just know that you are not alone in that. Sometimes it's helpful to start with a really short one mindfulness practice a day, and lengthen it. When we're trying to connect our brains and our bodies, in order to promote a better connection for healthy body image or whatever it is that we're going for, it's good to take those moments to really just sit and connect. And using something like a mindfulness or a meditation, a visualization is a really good way for us to be able to connect our mind and body and to be able to get into our system. So how do we use that in real life when we're not sitting and doing a meditation like this? Some things that work for other people, and I would just like to share with you. This is just one thing. There are so many different things out there that you can do, so many different interventions and tools, and this is literally just one, okay? But if it works, take it. It's for you. Okay, so I recommend when you notice that there's that heightened arousal or emotional state, when you start to feel that anxiety coming on, or you start to feel panic or worry or big emotions, you feel the body starts to get hot, that's a sign that maybe a check-in might be a good idea. When it comes to things like anxiety, we notice it in our bodies before we actually register it in our brains. Our bodies recognize that first and start to tell us with physical warning signs. Okay, so the first thing would be to notice it and then stop. Okay, notice the emotions, the feelings, and the sensations and the thoughts. This is where it gets really tricky, is that when that's happening, you might hear, oh, I feel really upset right now, or I feel really worried right now because, and then the thought that comes in at that moment, you might not want to hear. That thought might be something that you go, oh, I don't want to be thinking that, or I shouldn't be thinking that, or that's not what I'm working towards. And at that point, what we can tend to do is start to dismiss it. Okay, well, I'm not going to think about that. Don't think about that thought. But we want to accept that thought without judgment. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to dismiss it or deny it. As athletes, we're so good at fixing things. We've spent our whole lives like learning how to apply something and fix it. We take corrections really well. And so when we hear these thoughts, we try to fix them right away. But the problem with that is that if we try to fix it right away or get rid of it right away without even accepting that it's there, it can actually get bigger. So here's an example. I want you to not think about your favorite kind of ice cream right now. So as I'm speaking, do not picture yourself holding an ice cream cone. Do not picture what your favorite kind of ice cream tastes like, what color it is. Don't picture the store that you got it from, and definitely do not imagine what it tastes like. Were you able to not picture ice cream? Maybe. I'm guessing that most people at some point while I was speaking there could not think about the ice cream. When we tell ourselves not to think about something, we think about that thing. Because what else are you supposed to do? I don't know what I'm not supposed to do. Or I know what I'm not supposed to do, but I don't know what I am supposed to do. Right? If I asked you to go to the grocery store and to not get bananas, do not get milk, and do not get oranges, you wouldn't know what to get. You'd be like, okay, so I don't want to get those, but what do I get? Our brains work the same way with the messages that we're telling ourselves. If we tell ourselves not to think something because it's shameful or we don't want to, but we don't know what to fix it with, or we pretend it's not there, it actually can get bigger and bigger. Like a baby who cries, but you don't give it what it needs, it's just going to cry more until you deal with it. So the first step is to accept that thought, even if we don't like it. Yes, okay, I had this thought that I'm not good enough. I had this thought that I'm too fat. I had this thought that my body doesn't work. Okay, I don't like the thought, but I had it. Now, once I've accepted that thought, then I can start to use that self-compassion and connect with my body and ask it what it needs. But until I accept that that thought exists, it's not going to change. Let's talk about comparison and how that links to what we just talked about. Comparison comes up really, really often for athletes and for artists. Actually, probably for everybody, let's be honest. So let's talk about comparison versus admiration, because one of them is good and one of them is not. Okay, so comparison, we often find ourselves comparing to other people. When we compare, we don't feel good about ourselves. So comparison is analyzing ourselves in contrast with another person and assuming that one or the other is better. It doesn't always mean that they're better. Sometimes it means that I think I'm better, but I'm comparing and saying that I think one or the other is better. Comparison will often lead to the wish that the other would not have the quality, the strength, or the ability which we are comparing, and that we want to take it away from them. We don't want them to have it. If I don't have it, they can't have it either. Neither party can grow from comparison. It's the desire to have the quality or strength or ability for ourselves, but not for them. The focus is on the other. I put all my energy into that other person and how I don't want them to have it. Whereas admiration, we can recognize a strength or ability in others, and we use this to better ourselves. We use it to grow. This is where our growth mindset comes in. This is our inner cheerleader versus our critic. By not desiring to take it from them for us, that's how we know it's admiration. But by growing ourselves in our own way, maybe to meet their level, but not in their own lane. It's in my lane. So it allows us to learn from others and to apply our learnings to ourselves. The focus is on myself and my own growth. So admiration is healthy. It's good. Admiration is what helps us grow our team. Comparison is what leads to negative self-esteem and negative body image and disconnects a team. Admiration helps us keep on our own path, and it uses other people's strengths to help us move towards our own strengths and goals without compromising theirs, whereas comparison is a dead end. I want to talk about coaching. I'm guessing that some of us in this group are coaches. Now, there's a lot on this slide, and I try not to do that, but I did it. I'm sorry. So feel free to take a picture of this and don't feel like you have to write it all down. These are all things that come from strengths-based coaching and teaching. Okay, so this is a shift from a shame-based approach towards a strength-based approach. Now, shame-based approaches get results. They get fast results. When we shame somebody by our words or our actions, they will change. We will get the result that we desire, but it comes with a lot of other costs. And the costs aren't on us. The costs are on the other person. So if I'm coaching someone and I use shame-based methods, I might have a really great athlete who might achieve a ton of big goals. That's good. However, that athlete might be burdened with a ton of self-esteem issues and with body image concerns. That athlete might actually develop an eating disorder. That athlete might have anxiety or depression. And all of that takes place outside of my care. As a coach and as a profession and as an industry, we have a moral obligation to stop that from happening. That is less important. Those high achieving goals are less important than the people who are in our sport. The people are more important, and it is possible to have both. It's actually more likely when we use strength-based approaches that our athletes will have better outcomes and will have higher successes than with strengths or with shame-based. Shame-based will give you faster results perhaps, but it will not give you the longevity that you need. So some things to think about. We want to avoid talking about the body without being specific. So we want to use specific body terms and talk about anatomy. We want to avoid using language such as tummy or butt or bum. And instead, we want to use the real terms such as engage your transverse abdominis, use your drop your coccyx or your tailbone. We want to actually talk about the muscles that are in the athlete's body so that they become understanding of the things that make their body work and they have a healthy relationship with the body mechanics. Use imagery that emphasizes space and spatial pulls rather than focusing too much on their bodies or their body types when possible. Do not compare their bodies, even when we hope to be helpful. For example, oh, look at Susie, she's got this great form here. For two reasons. Susie now feels really put on the spot and maybe doesn't want other people looking at her body. And all of those other people who don't look like Susie know that they cannot make their body do what Susie's body does because Susie has certain legs that they do not. Anytime we compare their bodies, whether it's to tell somebody that they did a good job or not, they do not hear it the way we intended it. Ask them permission, teach them about consent by modeling it. Is it okay if I offer this correction? Is it okay if I move this? Be specific when saying good. Don't just say good. Don't just say better. Make sure that they know what it is that they did well and what it is that you want them to improve on. Do not be vague. Ask them open-ended questions to encourage them to engage in critical thinking and process-oriented results. So I recommend using how questions. How did you make that happen? How did you think about that differently when you did it that second time and got a better result? How did you decide to move that way? How is a really good process-oriented? What can sometimes be more outcome-oriented? Praise their processes, but not their body achievements. Okay. Avoid praise. As I just say praise this, sorry, I should have changed that wording there. The reason that I say avoid praise, there's a lot of new research that's coming out that talks about praise is actually contributing to lower self-esteem and body image. We want to start to bring out more internal praise from the student or from the athlete rather than us telling them what they did well. So we can find ways to ask them, what was that like for you that time? Let them say what they thought went well, and then maybe offer some feedback from your perspective. Let them become more involved in praising themselves rather than waiting for someone else to tell them. Do not compliment or comment on bodies exclusively. Give them positive feedbacks on skills and incorporate their mental processes as part of their successes. I'm going to clap my hands on this one. Stop undervaluing women in sport. Start being loud. Don't undervalue yourself. Say every child or athlete's name several times per session. Give them simple and clear positive messages mixed with areas for growth. Let them know that you see them they're there. The more you validate their strengths, and then they'll be able to take more risks. When they're afraid and they feel shamed, they will not take risks and they will not try. They'll be afraid of mistakes. But if you validate their strengths and tell them what they're good at, they will take more risks and try more things. And when we make mistakes, because we will, the amount of times that I have carried biases and said things that I know I didn't mean because some other coach said it to me and I brought it through, apologize when you do that. Recognize those old patterns or assumptions and the biases that are creeping in that you don't want to be there, and then make changes. Don't judge yourself for it, just validate it. Try asking them, what questions do you have, rather than any questions, which will facilitate more process. Again, take a picture on this one, on culture. In sport, we need to start to question the way that things have always been done. Just because it was always done that way does not mean it should continue being done this way. We need to unlearn and change the culture. We need to correct shame-based practices and body-focused practices. They will come up. We can't just fix it overnight. You will say them. You'll catch yourself, but then correct it. Normalize body image problems to make it safe to talk about. So a myth, like people think about suicide as well. If you ask about it, that it might give somebody the thought that maybe they should consider it, that's a myth. It will not encourage them to engage in behavior. Ask about diet. Ask if your athletes are eating. Ask what they're eating. Make it normal to talk about these things. Talk about eating disorders. Make it normal so that those of them who are struggling with it do not have to keep it hidden. Make it safe. Do not call them out on it, but talk about these things. We need to talk about it. We need to call out and correct shame-based practices. We need to not protect or excuse coaches or leaders who have engaged in shame-based practices because of their status, their age, or their power. We need to learn about trauma-informed coaching and practices and create a culture of safety and mutual respect, one that does not abuse power. You need to get out of situations that promote those things. We need to stop perpetuating them and allowing them to go on, especially against ourselves. Because of risk of losing status, be brave and be bold and be the change that you wish to see for future athletes that we didn't have. And then validate your own experiences and the biases that you might be carrying. We have to do that uncomfortable work of confronting them. They're there because we're a product of where we grew up. So record yourself, record others, and listen to what you say, and then hold each other accountable, hold yourself accountable. And then just talk about body image and women's issues in sports more and more. Open the space for these kinds of conversations with your athletes and make it permissible to have these body image concerns. The more permission we grant, the more we can start to battle it. If we tell ourselves we shouldn't feel this way about our bodies and we should love it, when we don't actually believe that, we want to hide it. And then the hiding is what causes the biggest problems. We need to break the stigma by talking about it and putting it in the open. We need to normalize that these things happen, they occur. And we need to avoid denying that it exists. Do not try to protect your sport by denying that these issues are present. Many dance companies around the world that I know of are still doing weigh-ins. Even though as a dancer, I don't want to admit that that's true. Tons of female athletes have eating disorders. We don't want to admit that that's true because there's a stigma. We need to stop protecting the sport and start protecting the people that are in it by making it a safer space. This is actually a quote from me. So you may see yourself as a work in progress, but that does not mean that you're a fixer-upper. We need to start to see ourselves in a way that has acceptance and also truth and validity behind what's there. Instead of I shouldn't feel that way and I should feel grateful for my body and love it the way it is, maybe try just starting at, I do not like that thought, but right now I'm struggling with blank in terms of my body, the way that it looks or functions. And I want to be able to have gratitude for my body. I can love myself and have bad days. Which could then later become, I'm not perfect, but I love myself and I love my body the way that it is. But we can't just go from one to the other without that middle piece. We need to not comment on women's bodies in any way that does not reflect our athleticism or have any athletic merit. Men don't fight the same battle that women do. And it's up to us to keep bringing each other up and fixing this from within. I wish I could have really just given you the right answer and the cure on how to fix body image for athletes and for women in sport. But I don't think that there's one right answer. I do know that a big part of what needs to change is the culture. And I know that every single female client that has come into my office brings this up, that she struggles with this in some way. It's particularly important right now with the pressures of COVID and what it has done to our athletes. The eating disorder program in Calgary has seen 125% to 150% increase in new anorexia nervosa diagnosis since March of 2020. We need to make it safe for athletes to share what they are going through without them feeling like they need to hide it or deny it. We can't fix something that's being swept under the rug. Do not be afraid to open these conversations and have them. It's happened behind closed doors for so many years, and we need to open the doors and start to make change. The unlearning is really uncomfortable, especially when you start to see how you have perpetuated the problem and been a part of it. We do not want to admit that these issues are taking place in our sports. We want it to be better than that, but the truth is that they still take place. And we all have a job and a role to play. So if you have questions, please send them. This is my information here. I'm happy to talk further and answer any questions that anybody might have about my perspective or about anything that I brought up today that maybe you want a little bit more clarification on. I am a Canadian certified counselor. I work at 2 clinics in Calgary. I work at In-Depth Physiotherapy and Counseling. And I also work at the Therapy Collective. One is in the northwest of Calgary and one is in the southwest. And I also offer virtual counseling and therapy for artists, athletes, and dancers across all of Canada. So feel free to give me a follow and reach out on my website if you want to reach out and ask me any questions. And thank you so much for having me today.